Joining us is Democratic Congressman from Colorado, Jason Crow, a veteran who serves on the Intelligence and Armed Services Committees. Congressman, thanks for being here. What do you make of the lack of information Congress has received so far throughout this entire mission?
Well, Anna, it's both a lack of information and constant contradictions by the president himself and his top advisors, who are saying different things depending upon which hour it is. And also, you know, I sit on the Intelligence Committee. I have seen battle damage assessments. I was attacked this morning on Twitter by the president's special advisor, Rick Grinnell, who has said that Congress hasn't seen the full battle damage assessment. So which is it? Are they hiding it? Are they withholding it from Congress? Or are they lying to us? So there is a lot of questions here, and we're very short on answers right now.
When you have the chance to ask questions at this briefing, what do you want to learn?
Well, you know, I think the most important question here is, what is the actual strategy, if there is one, of this administration? I was an Army Ranger and a paratrooper. I served 3 combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. I know that America went to war for 20 years. We spent $3 trillion, over 6,000 American lives, lost credibility. Both of those wars turned out poorly by almost every measure. What are we doing here? Is the president's strategy just every 6 months to a year bomb these facilities? Are we just going to drop bombs and we'll wait for Iran to rebuild, and then we'll drop bigger bombs, and then they'll dig deeper and then we'll drop bigger bombs? Are we going to be caught in another Middle East quagmire? Or are we going to actually have a diplomatic solution that's permanent and verifiable, that ensures that Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon? Because that is actually the only way to do this, not military bombing.
You point out how, once again, it appears the White House is at odds with its own intelligence, which, as we mentioned, indicates Iran's nuclear program was set back only 3 to 6 months, not, quote, obliterated, as the president and some members of his administration have said. I know you've seen that initial assessment. I know you won't characterize it because it's classified, but you touched on this. Can the American people trust the message from this administration? How do Americans learn the truth?
Well, I take this point so seriously. When I was a paratrooper, I was sent to war in Iraq based on distortions and lies and politicized intelligence. So I get extremely upset when I have a president and people that are at the top of our national security infrastructure that are refuting and saying that our intelligence community is lying, that is distorting, twisting the intelligence if it doesn't match their narrative, if it's not something that they want to hear, or if it's refuting their political narrative. This is so dangerous when a commander-in-chief is doing this, because when somebody talks tough in Washington, when Washington elites pound their chest and saber rattle, you know, it's not them that has to go off and do the fighting. It's working class kids like me from the upper Midwest, from the West, from rural towns that have to pick up rifles or get into planes and do the tough, dirty work. This is very dangerous business.
You have been in the shoes of our U.S. service members. What do you make of the administration turning any question about the strikes on Iran as disrespecting the troops?
Well, it's antithetical to everything that I believe about the role of civilian control of our military. You know, when I put on those boots and I picked up the rifle and I went to war, I needed to know that people were asking tough questions, that they were having debate, that we were being used wisely, that we had the equipment, that we had the support, and that this was actually a mission that was important for America.
So Donald Trump and all of his MAGA minions, many of his MAGA minions, I guess I should say, have been lying to the country for days. They have lied to all of us over and over and over again.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Those pilots hit their targets. Those targets were obliterated.
We have obliterated the Iranian nuclear program.
We are confident, yes, that Iran's nuclear sites were completely and totally obliterated.
Iran's nuclear program has been completely and totally obliterated. I feel like maybe they had a note card that said obliterated on it and they gave it to all those people and made them say it. Who knows? But that was the message from the Trump administration since Saturday night. Clearly, that's what they kept saying over and over and over again. Even, by the way, as top members of the military, including high-ranking people within this administration, were saying it was too early to make an assessment. Because it was too early to make an assessment. And now here are the headlines from this afternoon. Here's one from CNN. Early U.S. intel assessment suggests strikes on Iran did not destroy nuclear sites. From the New York Times, strikes set back Iran's nuclear program by only a few months, U.S. report says. That's according to an initial classified intelligence assessment, which reportedly found that the U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, quote, did not collapse their underground buildings and set back Iran's nuclear program by only a few months. In fact, from all this reporting, a lot of it came out this afternoon, it turns out that much of Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium was moved before the strikes, which destroyed little of the nuclear material. In our own reporting, NBC News put an even finer point on it, saying, quote, an initial assessment by the Defense Intelligence Agency concludes that the U.S. airstrikes conducted over the weekend on Iran's nuclear enrichment sites were not as effective as Donald Trump said. To state the obvious, claiming you obliterated Iran's nuclear program doesn't make it so. And it's something that people then assess, including the military. But for Trump, it's always about the one day of headlines, the one-word slogan, claiming victory right off the bat, about obfuscation and defiance being prioritized over facts. And that will continue, I expect, even in the face of these new facts. Takes, for example, the statement released today by White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. Here's what she had to say. This alleged assessment is flat out wrong and was classified as top secret, but was still leaked by an anonymous low-level loser in the intelligence community. Whew, there's a lot to unpack there. Couple questions here. If the assessment is flat out wrong, why was it classified as top secret, as she also characterized it? And if it's top secret, why do low-level losers, as she called them, have access to it? Lots of questions there. Her statement obviously makes no sense. Of course it doesn't. But we see this cycle constantly. Donald Trump says something, facts and reality say something else, and then his people have to kind of twist themselves into knots trying to explain why he's right and we're all apparently crazy, though we're not. I mean, it was just yesterday that Trump announced that he had brokered a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. In fact, he was so confident in his negotiation skills that he told NBC News, quote, I think the ceasefire is unlimited. It's going to go forever. I don't believe they will ever be shooting at each other again. But that statement had a shelf life of a few hours because Israel and Iran started firing at each other overnight, just a few hours after he said that. Even Trump couldn't deny that reality. And the embarrassment that his ceasefire wasn't as forever as he had hoped, and all those big feelings, apparently, prompted him to drop an F-bomb on the White House lawn this morning.
We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
Well, someone is a little cranky today, it seems. But that was the pure unvarnished reaction you get when Trump cannot spin away the truth. When facts on the ground make it impossible for him just to declare victory and kind of walk away. And we can expect to see more of it. Because Trump's spin on these Iran strikes keeps falling apart every day. I mean, for days now, Trump has been contradicting his own intelligence chief, saying that Iran was suddenly closer than ever to obtaining a nuclear weapon. That's what he said. That's what he said started this war in the first place. But as the Washington Post reveals, Netanyahu's decision to strike Iran had been in the works for months, even before Trump was elected, and was more kind of a strike of opportunity than a strike of necessity. I mean, there were Post reports that when Netanyahu finally launched a surprise attack on Iran, the decision was not so much driven by new intelligence indicating an Iranian sprint for a nuclear weapon or any imminent threat to Israel. Rather, Israel seized on what it saw as a unique opportunity to execute plans, carefully laid months and even years in advance. In other words, the urgency of the attack had nothing to do with brand new intelligence.
Ignatius, I just went through and sketched out a couple that I've seen so far. Of course, you have the president saying that the facilities were completely obliterated. As we just said, Israel said the damage was, quote, very significant. And the Natanz facility was, quote, completely destroyed. The Defense Intel assessment said that they didn't dismantle fundamental elements of the nuclear program. They delayed the program to 3 to 6 months. And the IAEA said it was, quote, directly impacted. And some had, quote, extensive damage. So still, we're sort of in the fog of war right now. But tell us what you know, what you've heard, what we should be looking for.
So, Joe, first, initial intelligence estimates are an art more than a science. It takes a while to have enough information to make good judgments. There's a history of policymakers being unhappy when intelligence analysts say the claims that people are making, especially for military programs, simply aren't being borne out on the ground. That happened repeatedly with Iraq and Afghanistan. It happened with Vietnam. Consistently, intelligence analysts said these wars are not going the way policymakers think. Now we're seeing a new version of that. The president's language is so hyperbolic, to use words like obliterated when you have no early evidence whatsoever, is just silly. And now the reaction to the analysts' initial comments, and I should note that the analysts themselves say they have low confidence in these estimates, meaning we have very little information to go on. But the reaction has been childish as to the word that comes to mind. It's like there's no Santa Claus. What do you mean I wasn't obliterated? But I think it will be some days before we get really confirmed, reliable accounts. The issue this raises to me is, well, if this was a worthy target, if destroying Iran's nuclear capability was something in the interest of the United States, then the implication of this first assessment that you didn't set the program back.
What Trump did was lie to you, lie to the American people, really, in my opinion, in a treasonous capacity. Because to try to justify, retroactively justify his illegal war. And again, it's illegal both in an international sense. Macron, the French president, has said it, right? That this violates international law. The United States cannot just willy-nilly, without a declaration of war, just bomb another country under the simple suspicion that they may at one point have something that could be bad. That's not how this works, right? Like, for example, I mean, Iran, ironic as it is, might have justification for attacks on Israel because Israel bombed them, right? But neither Israel nor the United States in any real capacity followed international law. I'm not sure about the Israelis' internal process. Let's assume they followed their internal laws when it comes to attacking Iran. Let's say that what their government didn't violate Israeli law. I don't know. Let's just assume. We know what Trump did violated American law, however, because what's extremely clear is that the president needs congressional approval. Now, I disagree with this. I think Congress would have given him the approval. Like, let's be clear. There's a lot of warmongers in Congress, and it's every Republican except Massey and also a few Democrats, more than a few Democrats. So he would have gotten the approval, but just chose to not do it anyway, and then lied to people, not only lied to people about the intelligence that the United States had, lying to the people, being treasonous to you, right? But also then lying about the destruction of the nuclear capability. Donald Trump doesn't respect you or the Constitution.